Members, welcome back. So we are having the meeting of the subcommittee on 3 pieces of subsidiary legislation related to road traffic. Time is up, and for us to start the meeting, we have formed a quorum, so I call the meeting to order. Let's continue with the cross-by-cross scrutiny. Ms. Zhang, just now we stopped, clause 19. Pages 0024 to 0029 of the Chinese version of the marked up copy. So members, please refer to 0024 to 0029 of the marked up copy. At our last meeting, we welcome members' questions regarding the individual clauses. Ms. Lillian Kwok would like to ask a question, please. Thank you, Chair. I think there is this clause about exemption. And that's in relation to those school buses manufactured before the 1st of January 1984. How many have we still got them on our roads? Ms. Zhang. I think the TD has got a record. Mr. Tang, according to the current record, we haven't got any private light buses manufactured before 1984. Can you repeat that? According to our record, we haven't got such vehicles. No more. Fine. Ms. Kwok, I've got certain points to make. We have to move with the times. Since we haven't got any such vehicles, that is, private light buses belonging to schools that were manufactured before 1984, why don't we delete this one? Ms. Zhang, we made reference to the existing provisions concerning private light buses. To uphold consistency, we have reserved this item. In the future, when it comes to miscellaneous amendments, we'll try to remove such inappropriate clauses. Now, you talk about there may be other light buses, like the red public light buses that were manufactured before 1984. But then here you're referring to student service vehicles, so I don't think it's meaningful to keep it. Thank you. We will actively give consideration to your proposal. All right. We are still on CAP 374F, marked up copy. And we're supposed to look at 0024 to 0029. So, Ms. Zhang, please continue. Clause 20, 0030 to 0031, Regulation HF. This is to have the new HF. And that's in relation to the student service, and that's in relation to the applicability as well as the exemption, so that all student service vehicles, both existing and newly registered vehicles, will be covered. Any questions? No? Then Ms. Zhang, please continue. All right, 21, that is Regulation 10 to be amended. Would like to add HB and HD and HG, so that drivers and passengers must wear the seat belts. In fact, 21 says that the Commissioner may exempt the requirement to comply with that. Please continue. 22. 0033 to 0034, the penalty clauses. In the event of contravention, new offences are created, and then there will be the defence of reasonable excuse. There are also certain textual amendments. Ms. Kwok, in relation to reasonable excuse and the lack of it, I want to know I think probably many drivers are not quite aware of how the law will be enforced. He may be caught by the police, and then there will be an investigation. Reasonable excuse and not an unreasonable excuse, would that be taken up only in the context of a court, or what is it? Well, just now the police have already given an explanation. There will be guidelines for the frontline officers, whether the drivers have put in the best efforts to make sure that the safety belts are being worn. So that will be considered in the case of putting up a defense of reasonable excuse. She wants to know when we are going to be able to put up this defense. Only when we go to the court. Let me take up this question. When our officers arrive at the scene, they will try to understand what happened from the driver and from other passengers, so as to make sure that the officer has an initial understanding of what happened on the at the scene. Now, if the driver had already repeatedly reminded that offending passenger and other passengers corroborated the evidence, and the driver was forced to stop the vehicle, then our colleague would have an understanding of the details of the case. This may be regarded as a reasonable excuse, and there is an initial judgment, and there's no need to go to the court. So at the front line, the case could have been dealt with. Well, say for example, if your frontline officer thinks that is not credible, then the case may result in a summons, or and then does it mean that in the court the defense can be put forward? Yes, absolutely. Well, on the scene, on the site, the officer may think that it is not a reasonable excuse, but then the judge and the court will consider whether it is credible and whether it is truthful. So the case will be dealt with by the court. Please continue. 23. 0035-48, amendment to be made to Schedule 2. So parts 1 to 5 will be amended. I mean, the divisions will be amended. That's in relation to seat belts, etc. Parts 6 to 9 will be added so as to provide for the integral anchorage points and seat belts, including the national standards. Members, any questions? Mr. Andrew Lam, thank you. I would like to comment on the standards. First of all, with the ISO fix. For bracket E, well, it come into place on a number of occasions. Well, we have the GB, etc., etc. What about ISO fix? Is it a national standard of the PRC? I would like to defer to the TD. Mr. Tang. ISO fix. Is a standard. Say, for example, certain buckles of the seat belt would be in line with the ISO fixed standards. How does it align with the national standards of the PRC? Are they related or are they separate? You're correct. What do you mean? Interrelated. The GB can be applied to the ISO fix. In other words, the ISO fix cannot be, say for example, taken together with A to D, where a number of standards or specifications appear. TD, Mr. Tang. Well, the GB can be applied to the ISOFIX. For other standards from other countries, maybe they can be taken together with ISOFIX. For the GB, that can be used together with ISOFIX. I ask this question because for standards A to E, they are national standards of other countries. For ISOFIX, if it is separate and it is applicable to different national standards. Now you add it to F, the national standards of the PRC. I think it's a matter of perception. If they are two separate things, separate them. Don't give people the impression that the two go hand in hand but not applicable to other national standards. So it is a matter of perception. So Mr. Lam has got this question, that is whether GB 14167 and ISOFIX are compatible. Japanese standards or European standards are listed out separately, separated by the word or. Now you have it together. So we want to know whether the GB and ISOFIX are comparable. If so, then to avoid confusion, then you should present it in the same way as you talk about the Japanese standards and the Australian standards. Well, for GB 14167-2013, contains the wording that follows. We are simply highlighting the title. I don't know if Mr. Lam understands. I don't understand. Well, ISOFIX, is it part of the GB? ISO, my understanding is that they are the international standards organizations publications. Well, for GB 14167-2013, then it is called Safety Belt Anchorages, ISOFIX Anchorage Systems, and ISOFIX Top Tether Anchorages for Vehicles. So that's the full title in Chinese. So it is one and all. It is an integrated one. So point understood. Mr. Lam. On page 0045, we have yet to reach part 6. Are we there? We take them all together. Yes, Mr. Lam, please continue. Part 6, paragraph A, directive, blah, 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 issued by the EEC in 1975. In the paragraph A, well, in fact, under part 5, again, we have got the European Economic Community Directive or regulation. But then that was replaced by the new requirement in 1975. But then we're talking about the 1975 directive. Are you trying to update it while you have the opportunity or not? An amendment in 1975 probably is not something new. That brings out a question. I just wonder whether we have caught up with the latest requirements. How quick are we? TD? correct. Mr. Lam is correct in his observation. We are talking about standards applicable to buses. In 2027, we are going to dispense with that requirement. But then certain buses have been ordered and they are being manufactured. So we do allow for such standards to be applicable. But after a certain date, this standard should no longer be applicable and we can't use such vehicles. 1975, I think year 1975, right? So a lack of 50 years and you're only using this standard now. There may be new standards and they may not be applicable in this case. But then what worries me is that the various national standards that we have included here will be updated all the time. So we have to be tolerant about vehicles being manufactured. And for those new standards that are being expected, we have to include them. So I think we have to watch the developments, otherwise the newly arrived vehicles will not be in compliance with our existing standards, right? Exactly. And that's why we are saying that the commissioner may, in the case that it is a better and appropriate standard, be embraced. So we have already included such a provision. Well, let me expand on Mr. Lam's question. For safety-related provisions, you have to be updated. Now, for the EEC or the European Union whatsoever, in the 1970s, in the 1980s, they have made the relevant safety standards. Probably in 10 years' time, they would have already been updated. So if you want to have tighter requirements and newer standards, well, at the same time, you have got vehicles that are not compliant. So when you draft a law, you would certainly be referring to certain vehicles that won't be caught by the latest standards, sort of grandfathering them. Now, the way that this one is presented to us, readers got the impression that such vehicles adhering to 1970 standards are still valid. Now, will the TD have a system that will be watching the developments of various national safety standards all over the world so that we can bring our requirements up to date? Well, the chair and Mr. Lam's observations are correct. That's why we have got Part 7. That is for anchorage points for buses first registered on or after 1st of May 2027. So for those first registered after 1st May 2027, they have to follow the tighter requirements and the newer requirements, right? Your observation is correct. Mr. Mack, Chair, and Mr. Lam. Have yet to be supplemented by the TD. Yes, a long time ago, in 1975, the EEC passed the standards. But please look at the wording. It includes the amendments thereafter. So the starting point is the one dated 1975, but in fact any amendments thereafter will also be included. And the TD does follow this approach, and the TD follows the latest amendments, and the law enforcement agency will also do likewise. I'll just check with the TD to see if my understanding is correct. TD, correct. we have got colleagues that will be watching the latest developments and will apply the latest standards to scrutinize our caseload. Question answered? Answered, but there is still one point I want to share. I understand that in many parts, I won't name the specific one, there is a degree of flexibility and you can deal with the scenarios. Let me comment on the drafting of the regulation. You have a full list of them in the main text, but not in the schedule. Amendment of the schedule will be much easier and more flexible. Now, in the case of the EEC or the EU, you have got the sort of the principal standards. I'm not sure about the other standards. What I don't want to see is that the standards have already been thrown out of the window for a long time ago. Well, you say that it's fine with law enforcement, but in future, I hope you will adopt a different approach. That is, have the standards included in the schedule instead.
Thank you for the suggestion. Mr. Mack has answered part of the question. That means they have listed all the requirements since 1970, but within the bracket, it is stated that you would also adopt the latest standards. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Lam. Mr. Lee Cock. Chairman, a similar question. In the past, when we scrutinize legislation, we try to make reference to the UK standards, but that was repealed in 1984, and yet we are still enforcing that in Hong Kong. I think we all have that impression. Mr. Chan was also there. As I have asked, since there are no vehicles manufactured by 1984, we should update the legislation accordingly. I do appreciate that this time you have a clause under G, and it is stated that if there are any other specifications and standards that are demonstrated to the Commissioner to be substantially the same or even more stringent, then you would adopt such requirements. So you have already given the Commissioner some flexibility. But I hope that we will not be including different provisions over time. I hope we can move with the times and always adopt the latest standards. Any response from the administration? Mr. Mack? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Kwok. We have always been keeping an eye on the different standards around the world to ensure the safety of vehicles in Hong Kong. For this amendment exercise, we try to adopt some of the updated standards in the amendment legislation. I seem to recall last year or the year before, we have provisions regarding the construction and maintenance of vehicles, and we have included the national standards accordingly. So this is a continuous work for us, and I thank Mr. Andrew Lam for his suggestion. In future, maybe when we list out the requirements, maybe we did not use the form of subsidiary legislation, and maybe we should try to publish them in the Gazette so that it will be more convenient and we can be more up to date quickly. Mr. Tony Jay, a question? Chairman, I have some views to express. I do agree that the requirements may change over time. And for changes, is that because we want to go for greater safety? So for every time, the vehicles will be manufactured at different time, and they may not meet with the requirements. With, for example, like the fire safety regulations, what we're saying is that the situation is not unsafe, but we want to be safer. So we may need to impose new requirements. For example, for the factory safety issues, after a certain period of time, we do hope that there will be mandatory requirements to retire some of the old vehicles or old machinery. Have we come across such situation? Is it rather rare for vehicles? As Mr. Andrew Lam has pointed out, the standards are published in 1975. So the standards then may not still exist for vehicles which are complying with such requirements. Have you dealt with such cases in the past? So certain vehicles manufactured after a certain year may not be able to comply with the requirements. And there may be times that we find that the standards or requirements are not sufficient to ensure safety. So how are you going to deal with it? Because you list out all the standards and requirements here in the legislation, you need to update them from time to time. You should empower the Secretary to change the requirements. Mr. Mack? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will ask my TD colleagues to share some examples with members. Personally, I remember that for the emissions from vehicles, with the development of technology, then some of the vehicle emissions from the older vehicles may not comply with the standards, and then the Environment and Ecology Bureau would require such vehicles to be retired, or they will have to meet with the new requirements. Maybe we are not changing the standards, or maybe in the case of student service vehicles, we may require the older vehicles to be retired, and by 2028 December, these vehicles have to be fitted with seat belts and the safe seats, so we would also impose similar requirements. We are now talking about commercial vehicles, so we must consult the trade, and we have to strike a balance as to whether their operations will be affected, and on the other hand, how can we ensure safety? So we need to strike a balance. Transport Department. As the Deputy Secretary has pointed out, one example is about the environmental requirements. With the more stringent requirements concerning vehicle emissions, we will try to use different ways to tackle the issue. Maybe we'll give them financial incentive for the vehicle owners to retire their old vehicles and purchase new ones. And also through vehicle registration, we will impose requirements to set a deadline for retiring such old vehicles. And this will be giving the trade and the car owners some advance notice. So this is an example. Any further questions? If not, Ms. Zhang, please continue. Chairman, we have completed scrutiny of this piece of subsidiary legislation. So we have completed scrutiny of the LN 195, Road Traffic Safety Equipment Amendment Regulations, CAP 374F. Now let's move on. Are we going to LN 196? Yes, correct. Ms. Zhang, let's use the markup copy. Paper CB bracket 1 1398/2025 bracket 03. Ms. Zhang, please. The first amendment is not stated in the markup copy, so please look at LN 196, page B5669. It is stated that the regulation will come into operation on the 25th of January 2026. Any questions from members? Clause 2, it is also not appearing in the markup copy. Please go to page B5667. So we are going to amend the traffic control regulations, CAP 376G, and the provisions have 5 clauses. No questions? Clause 3, page 1 to 3 of the markup copy. It amends Regulation 42 concerning general driving rules. We amend Clause 42 bracket 1F 42(1)G and also 42(1)G1. These are amendments of the definitions and textual amendments. And we will include the definition of MTDs and then also the definition of regulated telecom equipment. And we will amend the wordings concerning mobile phones, etc. Any questions from members? Ms. Doreen Kong. Thank you, Chair. On the mobile telecom devices, does that include the smartwatch and the smart glasses? Ms. Zhang? Thank you for the question. For MTD, it covers mobile phones, laptops, etc. It does not cover smartwatch and other smart glasses. The reason is that smartwatch information display is limited, and the drivers will not pay attention to the smartwatch from time to time. So the extent of distracting the driver is less than that by mobile phones. So that's why we have not included the smartwatches. Ms. Kong? At this stage, I do understand, and I don't want to complicate the matter, but I see that in the case of UK, smartwatches are being banned for drivers when they are driving because they think that the distraction is actually similar to that of mobile phones. Well, the driver may be wearing 3 smartwatches, and then I put the smartphone in the car, so I'll be looking at all of them at the same time. So I do agree that no more than 2 devices should be displayed on the dashboard. But to move with the times, I think we have to pay attention to the development of smart products. I can see that for other overseas countries, they include that as mobile telecom devices. But it is up to us to consider what to be included in the definition of MTDs. Well, during the discussion of policy issues, there were questions concerning smart glasses, but this time Ms. Kong has raised a point about smart watches. So, Mr. Mack, would you like to respond to that? Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Kong. During the last meeting, Mr. Lee Chun-Kang has raised a question about smart glasses which are sold in the mainland and they display information. For this exercise, smart watches and smart glasses have not been incorporated in the amendment legislation, but we will definitely review the situation. We will look at the enforcement situation. If there are many drivers using such smart products and give rise to accidents, we will definitely review the situation. Also, we have the penalties for dangerous driving, reckless driving, etc. If a driver uses smartwatches or smart glasses and that give rise to traffic accidents, then it may lead to serious incident, and then he can be prosecuted under dangerous driving or reckless driving. Ms. Lillian Koch. Chairman, can I go back to Clause 2? I noticed that there are no proposed amendments, but I do have a question. It is stated that cassette radios and other on earphones. Are you referring to earphones with a wire? If we try to use phones and you have not covered earphones here, so what about the earphones being used on mobile phones? Are they included or excluded? I think we're on page 1, clause 42, bracket 1C. Well, a lot of people are now using Bluetooth earpieces, but some people do use earpieces with wires, but we don't use cassette recorders and we don't use radios. We now use mobile phones to listen to programs. I think Ms. Kwok is referring to, say, to 42 bracket 1C, saying that the drivers, when they are driving a motorcycle, they cannot wear any radio or cassette earphones. Chairman, I would defer to my colleague in the Transport Department on this existing provision. So this is the existing wording. Mr. Tang from TD? Well, under the existing provision, during a vehicle which is being driven, you cannot use a mobile phone by putting it in your hand, even if it is connected to some devices, for example, like earphones. So you cannot use your finger to touch the devices. We have not changed this provision here. It is an existing provision. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chair. A follow-up on Ms. Doreen Kong's point. The Deputy Secretary has responded to her. I'm looking at the provision, the Chinese version, and there is a provision governing the MTD placed on the dashboard. So if it is a mobile telecom device, whether it is a watch or whether it is a glasses or a projector, if they are being put in the vehicle and not worn by the driver, I think they will be captured. And then I think we would next look at the size of the screen of such devices. That's how I understand this provision. If you are interpreting it differently, you think we are only talking about just mobile phones or laptops, then it will be a different story. So when we were talking about the policies, some members have pointed out there are different telecom devices, and the development of such devices is very quick. Even for the projection devices, they are also developing very quickly. They may be blocking your eyesight. We are now talking about road safety. So my understanding of the legislation is that they should not be put on the dashboard. But we are not covering projections for the moment. But would they be covered under bracket 4 here? I assume that that is the case because it is being projected from a screen. But the word placement and the word of MTD, would these two wordings cover that such devices can only be put on the dashboard and they will be covered by the legislative requirements? Ms. Zhang? On MTDs, the definition is in page 7. So it covers a mobile phone, a tablet computer, or a laptop computer. Page 7, yes, correct. There is a definition of MTD there. MTD means what is stated in A, a mobile phone, a tablet computer, or a laptop computer. And B says that it does not include a device that is regulated under CAP 374A. So Mr. Lam's question is whether projection devices will be covered or not. So if you have a device that is placed on the dashboard, then they will be covered by this requirement, yes. But if you have a smartwatch or smart glasses, and they are not tablet computer or laptop computer, and they are not mobile phones, then they will not be covered. But I think Mr. Mack's explanation is that even if they are not covered, but from the point of road safety, if there is an accident and it is believed that the accident is caused by the use of such devices and the driver has been distracted, then there is still the liability for the driver. At the previous meeting, Mr. Mark has pointed out that with the development of technology, the administration will review the situation from time to time and will review whether other new devices would have to be covered by the legislation. And the key point is to ensure that the driver will not be distracted by such devices. Am I correct?
Mr. Lam, yes, the most important thing is to seek clarification on this. Well, can this clause handle the scenario that I've just pointed out? Probably not. But the administration has mentioned that there would be other regulations that could cover these gray area. Well, for today, I will perhaps temporarily accept this approach. But we should always bear in mind that these kind of smart devices are developing very rapidly. And I'm really quite worried about the projection devices because they are very economical, they are light, it's portable, it's very convenient. You could have some projection on your glasses. I actually was thinking of buying one myself. Well, I hope that we will watch this development. Thank you. Mr. Mack, any follow-up? Perhaps, yes. If not, let's move on. Ms. Chang? Clause 4, marked up copy, pages 4 to 7. It's to add 42B, that is on mobile telecommunication devices on motor vehicles being driven. This applies to the MTD that is placed on a motor vehicle in such a way that can be readily removed from the motor vehicle. And it states that the driver should not use the MTD while driving the vehicle, and there should not be more than 2 devices on the dashboard. And also there is a requirement about the measurement of the diagonal length of the screen, which is not more than 19 cm. And it shouldn't obstruct the driver's line of sight. And it also states under what circumstances the driver could use folded or bent MTD. Chairman, on 42B, I have 2 questions. First, on bracket 1, it says that these devices could be readily removed from the motor vehicle. What does it mean by readily removed? That's my first question. What about those that cannot be readily removed? Does it mean that it could be waived then? And my second question is that actually I've spent a lot of time looking at bracket 2A, bracket 1 and 2 about the where this could be placed, these devices could be placed. I think the English expression is even worse, especially on 2A, small 2. It says that for any other motor vehicles, at any spot that is forward of a virtual straight line drawn from and parallel to the bottom of the back of the driving seat. Could you perhaps draw this out? I really don't understand. I tried to draw it out. The English version says that that is forward of a virtual straight line drawn from and parallel to the bottom of the back of the driving seat. I'd like to ask the administration, did you copy these lines from somewhere? Could you tell me where it is from? It says forward of a virtual straight line drawn from the bottom of the back. I really don't understand what does it mean. Could you perhaps explain it to me? 2 questions. First, about readily removed. Second, about the virtual straight line. Ms. Cheng? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Kong. I will defer the second question to the DOJ. About readily removed, that means perhaps it is fixed with a screw, and if it is a kind of fixture in the car, we would treat it as something that is not readily removed. For instance, a kind of devices that are fixed on the dashboard. Second question, TD, Mr. Al. DOJ. Thank you, Ms. Kong, for your question. Ms. Kwong. Yes, Regarding bracket 2, too small 2, this is because we are talking about different kinds of vehicles. For instance, it could be minibus or buses. And we'd like to regulate the mobile telecommunication devices that are placed on the dashboard. So we include the minibus and the buses. Next to the driver's seat, there is no passenger seat, and that is why we try to express it in that way. We said that if a virtual straight line is to be drawn from the bottom of the back of the driving seat, for private cars, it would be the passenger seat next to the driver's seat. But for minibus and buses, there is no passenger seat next to the driver's seat. So that's why we try to express it in this way. If a virtual straight line is drawn from the bottom of the back of the driving seat. So inside the vehicle, we're talking about the space in between this virtual straight line and the space next to the driver's seat. I think Ms. Kong's question is whether the administration has drawn reference from other similar ordinances. Is this an expression that is used by other ordinances? Thank you, Chair. This time, this is a new regulation. That's why this is the expression that we find most suitable to express what we try to say. I'm sorry, Chairman. I really find it very difficult to understand it. I don't think the general public could understand what it means here. Could you perhaps make a drawing here next to the regulation? Otherwise, nobody would understand what does it mean. I really try very hard to understand it. For one, yes, after looking at the Chinese version, I could barely understood it. But for two, I really couldn't understand what it means. Could other colleagues perhaps enlighten me on that? Mr. Mack? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Kong. Normally speaking, for the driver's seat, the space in front of the driver. There's a space in front of the driver in the vehicle. Well, I think our colleagues in the TD have consulted the DOJ, and they explained it very carefully about the space that they tried to specify, and the DOJ also gave us advice on how to draft this regulation. Yes, we could consider perhaps adding a drawing next to the or some graphic next to the regulation. Mr. Au, would you like to supplement? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Kong. As what the Deputy Secretary has said, well, his understanding is correct. When the driver is driving a vehicle, he would be looking forward, and there is an area next to him. So we use the back of the driver's seat as the reference point, and from there forward, that is the area that we're trying to regulate, and we hope that this regulation would apply there. There could be different kind of vehicles, so that is why we try to make it very specific so that it could be applied to all kinds of vehicles. We will definitely provide some supplementary information so that even the layman would understand. For instance, we would add some graphics. so that these regulations could be understood more readily? Well, I think the administration should also explain it to the general public. Ms. Nixie Lam. I'm sorry, I think I've pressed the button wrongly. Mr. Andrew Lam then. Chairman, well, I accept this kind of expression. The reason is very simple. Well, I don't like vehicles in particular, but sometimes I will look at latest technology. I visited some car shows recently, and I found that there are some very modern vehicles that are really designed very innovatively. And it's very different from the traditional cars that we are used to. Some cars even could, for instance, it is driverless car, and there are different kind of design. So no matter how you draft the regulation, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to cover all sort of vehicles, or even the new ones that will be coming out to the market. So I accept this kind of expression. I understand what you are trying to say, and I understand why it cannot be written in a simpler way. So I accept it. Perhaps we should let the regulation apply first to see how it goes, and we should try our best to explain it to the layman. Well, for regulations and ordinances, the most important thing is to make it clear and precise, of course, and it should be readily understood by everyone. Well, this is a new regulation. It covers not just private cars or motor or buses. There could be different kinds of vehicle types. So we agree that we should perhaps accept this kind of drafting for the time being. But after the regulation is enforced, perhaps the administration should keep a close watch to see if the general public would really understand the regulations. Because we don't want to see members of the public making an offense inadvertently. So during law enforcement or when the ordinance is enforced, the administration should keep a close eye and see whether it should be revised. And if that is really the case, the administration is welcome to come back to the LegCo to amend the regulation. Next, Ms. Doreen Kong. Chairman, a quick question. On B, the device is not one that is being used only by any passenger of the motor vehicle. Does it mean that if there are 3 devices and if one of the passengers or the passenger next to the driver said that, well, this is actually my mobile phone, not the driver's, so I'm just putting it there to recharge my device. Would that be acceptable? Well, we try not to let the passenger display his smartphone in front of the drivers, lest it would distract the drivers or obstruct his line of sight. And that is why we write it this way. 42B bracket 2 bracket C. It's about the screen of the device that is visible to the driver. You're trying to say that you don't want this screen to be visible to the driver, lest it would distract him, right? But Ms. Kong points out that if the third vehicle is placed in front of the driver for recharging it, but it is not the driver's device, it's the passenger's device, would that be accepted? Well, basically, we just don't want the screen to be visible to the driver because we don't want the driver to be distracted. Ms. Kwok, Lillian Kwok, 42B bracket 4. Regarding the screen of the device visible to the driver has a diagonal length of more than 19 cm. Well, you mentioned that there should not be more than 2 devices. If I open this foldable phone, of course it would be larger than 19 cm diagonally. Would that be regarded as one screen or two screens? Ms. Cheng? Thank you, Ms. Kwok, for your question. Well, under that circumstances, we would look at the original design of the mobile phone to see if the two screens could display a continuous or complete vision or display. If two screens could show one continuous image, then it would be regarded as one screen, and it should not exceed 19 cm. What I'm saying is that no matter whether I am displaying two different images or one continuous image on these two screens, then I wonder whether it would be regarded as one or two devices. And also, different devices could be linked, right? If I linked two devices together, would that be regarded as one continuous screen? Well, the basic or the crux of the question is whether it would display continuous visual content together. Well, if they are two separate devices, adding together they would exceed 19 cm. Would that be acceptable? If they are placed together but showing not continuous image, well, actually, Ms. Kwok is stating different scenario. First, about two separate devices put together, and they are showing a continuous visual. And also, now you're saying that no more than two devices could be allowed, and each device, the diagonal length of its screen should not exceed 19 cm. But they're asking about having two devices being placed together, and each device has a diagonal length of less than 19 cm. Would that be regarded as one or two devices? And if there are two separate devices, of course, it is acceptable. And they are not larger than 19 cm. All right, that's acceptable. I think what members are trying to ask is, under different scenario, for instance, if two devices are put together, I think the objective is not to distract the driver or obstruct his line of sight. And if there are two devices, each does not exceed 19 cm. And if they are being put together and showing a continuous visual image, what members are trying to ask also is about a foldable phone being opened, but each screen showing a different visual content. So, and if it exceeds 19 cm, would you accept that? Yes, Chairman, I think your understanding is correct.
Ms. Kwok, I'm not sure whether I can help. I think the chair got what I meant to ask. Well, I think at this moment I accept the way that the regulation is drafted, but I'm sure with the advancement of technology, I think many devices can be linked together. And in fact, I have seen two devices being used as a single device, just like using a foldable phone. Now you don't allow a foldable phone to do that, but you allow two devices to be linked. So probably in future you need to try to address this. I think Mr. Mack answered the question a number of times. The authority would be responsive to our queries. They would watch the technological development closely. In due course, they would try to move an appropriate amendment, right? I think we got this reply from the Deputy Secretary quite a few times already. All right. Ms. Chen, please continue. If other members haven't got other points on this particular clause. The next one is clause 5008, and that's about the offenses and penalties. The new 42B will be covered. That is, anyone without reasonable excuse contravenes any provision of those regulations will attract a fine at level 2 and imprisonment for 3 months. Any questions, members? No? Ms. Zhang. Then that completes the scrutiny. Well, that means we have finished with LN 196, which is in relation to road traffic control amendment number 2, regulation 2025. We've done with the Chinese version. What about the English version? And legal advisor, do you have other questions arising from our ongoing discussion? We have checked the two versions. There isn't any discrepancies between the two versions, and your questions have been answered by the administration. Any follow-up? No. Well, members, in this case, the subcommittee has already completed the cross-by-cross scrutiny of the 3 items of subsidiary legislation. Well, a member would like to raise a question. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Chair. Well, yes, indeed, I would like to make this point. After completion of the scrutiny, I want to say that we agree that the regulations should be passed, but then some of them are too stringent. So I just want to give this advice to the administration. I think the public shouldn't be be alarmed or surprised if in future certain provisions are to be relaxed or certain requirements are to be relaxed, like what Lillian has mentioned, when 2 screens are put together. So I hope in due course the administration will fine-tune the requirements. But then we would like very much to pass the subsidiary legislation before the ending of the current term. And it is important for enhancement of road safety. Administration, as we have explained all the time, we know that it's important to have proper public education. And after launching the after the regulations have come into operation, we will follow the developments of technology to see whether we need to further revise them. Well, we've completed the cross scrutiny. Members, please note, if you intend to move any amendments to the 3 pieces of subsidiary legislation, please send your draft amendments by way of email to the Secretariat before 5 p.m. on the 19th of September, Friday. And then a word about the legislative timetable. Please note the following information. The scrutiny period will end on the 8th of October 2025. And for us to report to the House Committee, it will fall on the 26th of September 2025. Now you need 5 full days to give notice to move amendments, and that will be the 29th of September 2025. Please note the timetable. I intend to do the following. That is, I will report to the House Committee about our discussion. That is the 26th of September. AOB, I haven't got anything under AOB. If there is a need to deal with draft amendments, then we may need a further meeting. You'll be informed by the Secretariat. Without other points to cover, meeting adjourned. Thank you.